And look who's here in studio, former senior counsel to President Trump, Kellyanne Conway. Good to see you, Kellyanne.
Always a pleasure. How are you?
What do you think of this case?
I think the president made some good points. You can't have an attorney general who promised affirmatively on the campaign trail that she was going to prosecute Trump and people to believe that she can be an unbiased party. Why is she in the courtroom today, Elizabeth, rather than out in the streets of New York prosecuting criminals, cleaning up this big homeless mess that she's helped to create? She's got a governor, a Democratic mayor of New York, all complaining about the migrant crisis here that's unfolding and increasing, and yet she's there. She liked the camera today. The judge seemed to like the camera, smiling for it. The $18 million valuation of Mar-a-Lago is laughable on its face if you've ever been there or you know anything about real estate or you have a computer and can click on. So I think the president is going to win some sympathy, if not plaudits, among the public for some of the things he was saying. But the legal system is different. And what Brett just said is true. If you attack the judge or you forego having a jury trial, you're rolling the dice twice. But there's no one who's under more attack, and there's no one I know who could endure these kinds of attacks. But this is the beginning, not the middle or the end of these trials, of these processes. And if you look at the legal calendars and the way they're piling up and evolving, they butt right in there with some of these early contests and Super Tuesday, et cetera. The question, of course, remains then, how is he the front runner? Everyone knows all of this. They see it unfold. And his opponents in the Republican primary have not been able to prosecute the case against him as to why they would do a better job or how he's not going to be able to make it to face Joe Biden in a cage match rematch.
So let's move on to this story. What was your reaction when you heard Democrat Jamaal Bowman pulled the fire alarm? It's a red box fire alarm. He pulled it to delay the shutdown vote. They didn't like the House bill. They wanted to go with the Senate bill, the Senate spending bill. So do you think he should be criminally charged?
Well, they sure like to investigate everything under the sun. I remember my Hatch Act investigations, which went nowhere. So sure, why not? First of all, pulling a fire alarm, I believe, is an offense. But it's probably even more of an offense if you're doing it in the chamber where the House and Senate are meeting actively. And all he had to do was say, I screwed up, I was tired. He could tell the truth. But the truth of, I thought I was opening the door, doesn't sound plausible. I had to do that once when I was very young at school, and at the time, it was very hard to do. It's very hard to do. Yeah. And, it was just an exercise. And he knew what he was doing. If he doesn't, he shouldn't be in Congress. Why is he one of 435 representing us? But he probably thinks he's in a safe seat. He can say whatever he wants. And he's the one who said we need to prosecute all criminals. He was talking about Donald Trump. So I'd say if that's a crime, let's look into it. But it doesn't. He's a clown, honestly, for doing that.
Yeah, and he pointed out that he was a middle
and probably
school.
didn't know the camera was on.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. Why are you sorry? You sorry the camera's on? Or
right.
You sorry that you pulled a fire alarm as an adult of any type, let alone a member of Congress?
And he was a middle school principal, too, so he knows what it looks like. So, the other thing, too, is the spending bill. Nothing for border security right now. We know it's a 45-day stopgap. No new Ukraine aid, right? We're looking in that the U.S. sent nearly $5 billion to Ukraine to pay down its national debt. I think it's something like more than $130 billion we already sent. So that's going to be a major fight coming up, right?
It will be. I certainly hope the money is going towards military operations, only because we do have a vested interest in stopping Putin and making sure he doesn't keep advancing. And he has, murdered countless people in Ukraine. But I think that there is an argument, too, Elizabeth, that the United States of America, whether it's Ukraine or other nations, we are duty-bound to open our hearts, but not always our checkbook. Yeah. Quite the same way, as expansively. And I think that's important. And back to this New York thing, I've thought from the beginning, as somebody who testified twice in the Stormy Daniels grand jury, I thought from the beginning that what Bragg and James are doing in New York actually hurt those other cases. Because these are not the strong case. These would not be seen as the strong cases to the extent there are any, but these are not the stronger cases. And I think they sort of have stepped on some of these other cases and the timeline of them. If you look at this and you think Tish James and Alvin Bragg are doing a disservice and that these are not strong cases, they're just trying to get Trump and not get justice, then maybe you won't pay attention to Jack Smith. Maybe you won't, just the way I think the J6 Congressional Committee impeded what the Department of Justice was trying to do about January 6th.
That's really interesting. Kellyanne, you're terrific.
Thank you.
For joining
Thanks for having
us.
me.
It's good to see you.